Hey, this is Troutbitten. Thanks for joining me. Today let's talk about all the possibilities that you have when you're fly fishing with a monorig. Really, let's work through the adjustments, the simple adjustments that we make to the base leader to do a lot of different things. Because we fish nymphs on a tight line and under an indicator. We fish streamers in a bunch of different ways. We fish dry dropper. We even fish pure dries on the Troutbitten standard monorig. Because it's a hybrid system full of possibilities and you don't want to miss anything. You just need to learn a few adjustments. Are you ready? Here we go. So listen, the newest thing in fly fishing right now is sort of tight line, Euro nymphing, monorig styles. And I don't mean that it hasn't been around for a century, because it has. But these styles, these tight line styles are kind of, it's where the enthusiasm is. It's where a lot of the interest is. It's really where a lot of the new information is kind of coming from. Because it's kind of almost recently been, let's say, more accepted in the last, what, 10, 20, 30 years. So it is a hybrid system, meaning you can do fly fishing kind of things where the leader is pushing things around like a fly line. Or you can almost do like spin tackle kind of stuff where the weight of the streamer or the split shot or the nymph, whatever, the weight is actually taking the leader with it. That's what I mean by hybrid. So I first wrote about the monorig 8 or 9 years ago on Troutbitten. Since then, people use the term monorig quite a bit now, and they might be talking about something different when they say monorig. I'm talking about this Troutbitten standard monorig. The only reason I even call it that is because it's very different than, let's say, an ultralight system or a micro monorig or a thin monorig, and I use those too. But the thin and the micro thin, the ultralight stuff cannot do all of these things. I wouldn't call those a hybrid system, but more of a specialized system. Really, on this standard rig, I can real quickly switch to the micro. So it's important to understand that this leader is built to do, well, all the stuff we're about to go through. And I've written hundreds of articles on the website all about this stuff. So the whole thing's built for a reason and a purpose. People always ask me, hey, can I change materials? Can I sub out this, sub out that? Sure, but every bit of this leader, is purpose built. So I'm gonna lay out all the possibilities here, and we'll even throw a couple diagrams up, show you all the rigging necessary to kind of change things up and get the most out of the leader. You should then leave this video, I suppose, with a pretty good understanding of what's possible and how to get there. So, Troutbitten standard monorig. Go over the base leader. What it really is a 20-pound Maxima chameleon butt section, which is on this spool. That butt section is about 20 to 24 feet long, only as long as you need it, because you're going to change it out. I use fly line a lot too. And so it's just a leader. So I want to be able to switch over to my Harvey dry leader, for example, and fish dries with the fly line. 20-pound butt section, great, that's mostly still on that spool. And then a transition section of 12-pound and or 10-pound of about 2 feet. That's high vis Maxima. 12-pound red amnesia, 10-pound gold strand. Now look at this. This is a little backing barrel right here. I'll leave links to a lot of stuff here. I tie that backing barrel on so you can see that backing barrel is slid up and down when I want it. Provides visibility to the sighter. And I'd say all of this colored line is my sighter, but really this standard red amnesia and 10-pound gold strand is my standard sighter. And so it terminates then at a 1.5 millimeter tippet ring. And all of the changes we're gonna make, all the adjustments that we're gonna make are from that tippet ring and down. At that tippet ring is where all the good stuff happens. Now this standard sighter is a lot, let's say, thicker than many people use these days, but there's a reason for it. There's a lot of power here in this red amnesia. There's a lot of power here in this gold strand, compared to, let's say, the bicolor, the sighter material that a lot of companies put out. That stuff's built to be really visible. It's opaque, but it's also pretty flimsy, kind of floppy. This is built for power, so I have it when I want it. So the other day I was fishing this 4.5 to 5 feet, had one nymph on there at the bottom. I'm a blue collar worker. So that's tight line nymphing, and one of the first adjustments that we make is to throw an indicator on the tippet section. I put it on the top of the tippet section so that what's under the water is still just tippet, thin stuff. You don't want the cider under the water. We did a full video on this Dorsey yarn indicator. I'm not going to show you the details here because we have a 20-minute video on how to use this Dorsey yarn indicator. You can throw any indicator on there. I'm going to show you that too. But here we go. The Dorsey, or any indicator, beyond the cider. And this is where I keep the powerful cider in play because it's going to help to push and punch that yarn out there. And then, of course, this is slidable up and down. And that's your first adjustment, really. I will say, I don't like to mount an Indy on 6X. So this tippet is not 6X. It's not even 5X. Often I'll go 4X and then to 5X. Or I'll go 3X into a second piece down there that's 4X. That's your first adjustment. Real quickly, I'll show you the bobber too. So I'm still a Thingamabobber guy. The airlocks are great, but they're heavier. So I just pulled that yarn out of there. And you can see that I have an embroidery floss tag that I put on at my tying desk. And that just stays on there. As soon as I buy a new Thingamabobber, I put that embroidery floss tag on there. And now that's mounted slidable, just like that. Slides up and down, just like the Dorsey does. I will say, if I'm going to cast this with authority, then I put a backing barrel right there where my thumb is. A backing barrel with no tag acts as a bobber stopper. So I'll just show you the backing barrel. It's a uni knot, just 5-turn uni knot, mounted on the tippet that acts as this bobber stopper. I want it tight, not just snug, but real tight there. And then I'm going to clip off both ends. That's the indicator style. Boy, you don't want to miss that. That's a deadly way to fish nymphs. You could take tight line theory, tight line style, tight line advantage out to an indicator. Kind of combine two things, you get the best of both worlds. We use it a lot. So one of the things that makes all this work is these little foams. You don't have to have them, but I really feel like this is the best way to store things. These foams are holding all the changes that I want to make from the tippet ring and down. If you don't make it easy for yourself, you won't do it. We say that all the time. So for every foot of thin material that we have down here, this 1X or 2X bicolor, that's 1 foot less of the 20-pound butt section that's thicker that could create sag and drag, and that's 1 foot less of that that's hanging out of the guides, out of the tip top. So I've thinned things up. And then I have all 5X to the flies. Now what's most important here is not the fly position, but here we have 2 flies spaced about 20 inches apart. I almost always keep my heaviest fly as my point fly. But let me show you something else. It's not the weight of the flies that matter. I always say there are no Euro nymphing flies. They're just flies. And then you can put beads on them. And then sometimes we're going to put split shot. So I'll show you this. This is something I do that I would say most people don't do these days. It's certainly most popular to simply fish weighted flies. And I prefer to fish weighted flies most often. But here's an unweighted fly. The green weenie for me is one of these flies that I fish unweighted. I fish eggs unweighted and I fish worm patterns unweighted. I do a lot of things a little different. And now here we have split shot. And I put the split shot about 5 inches above my unweighted fly. Another rigging adjustment. You're going to get a different drift out of this than you would if this green weenie was weighted. It's just another way to do things. So the split shot comes off just that easy. It also goes on just this easy. You need the right shot. There. Now I want to show you a drop shot. So I took the shot off of here. It was 5 inches above the green weenie. And sometimes things are even better by running a drop shot rig. Not really here today to talk all about drop shot, but I do have a full, I think it's 5-part series on tight line nymphing to the drop shot. I'm going to show you the rig here. I'm tying a tag, an Orvis tippet knot, and you could use a double surgeons. You should keep the tag pretty short. Again, it's unweighted. When I run drop shot, I always keep the lower fly unweighted, and the upper fly can be whatever you would normally run on the upper fly. So there, this unweighted fly is on the tag. I'm gonna tie a drop shot ball on the point, and I kind of chuckle because I don't know anybody that does this. Even my buddies like Josh here. You don't use the drop shot balls, do you?
You got me on them.
Okay. So you could just run a split shot down here, but this is how I run my drop shot. It looks like it would tangle. It doesn't. It's because the weight is all the way at the end.
And because you're casting.
And you need good casting skills, that's right. Anyway, I ran the drop shot, in this case about 6 inches down. You can really vary that length. With the drop shot, you really get to decide exactly what part of the water column you want your nymphs to be fishing in, because you're gonna know where that shot is every time it ticks the bottom. So that's the split shot, that's the drop shot. And I'm gonna clip everything from the tippet ring and down. Now I remember I had the 1X, 2X bicolor extension. I'm wrapping all that up on this little foam because I know I'm gonna use it later. If not today, then tomorrow or the next day. This is what keeps your possibilities open. This is what keeps you versatile. That's ready to go. Put it aside. So I get a lot of questions about fly fishing small streams with the mono rig. I don't do it very much. To be honest, I just love fishing dry flies in small streams. And I've been sort of revisiting my history. I've been fishing small streams a lot lately. And what I've been using most to navigate around is the Troutbitten app. So Troutbitten is mapping software, and it's really the best in the business. And while I used to use the Landis guidebook a lot, and you can see I've used this Delorme Atlas quite a bit, I've been using the Troutbitten app more and more. Last Friday, for example, I was up north and I was fishing an area that I hadn't fished in, I mean it, like 20 years. And as I was looking at the Troutbitten app, I found what used to be a stock stream is now listed as Class A. So I went and fished it. Things change, right? So what used to be in here and in here is now here, along with a bunch of other information. I love it. So if you want to grab the pro membership, use the code Troutbitten for a 20% discount at maps.troutroutes.com. Thanks to Troutbitten. Now what if I want to get really thin? I want to use really small flies. There's a single 18 on here with a 2mm bead. And that is tied to 6X tippet, because when I use flies that small, I don't really want to tie them to 4X. They don't really have enough flexibility. That's my main reason. It's not because trout are afraid of the 6X. So I peeled this off. What I have then is the 6X to this 3X, about 2 feet of 3X. And I'm going to tie that onto my tippet ring. Once again, I'm thinning up the cider by extending it with this bicolor, in this case 3X. And that 3X, 2 feet of it, then goes to the 6X. And I have about 4 feet of 6X to a single 18. I can very much get almost a micro mono rig performance, because if you think about what you really have outside of the guides, if you're only fishing 25 feet away, there's really no butt section out of the guides. And what you'll really have is, yes, your standard cider, you really have your taper out of the guides and almost nothing else. So let's talk about floating the cider. Sometimes I'll do it with this. I already have this 3X bicolor extension on. I'll go ahead and paste that up and float it. But what is better is taking this off. What I'll usually do is go back to my base tippet section. But here I just tied the 6X onto my base or my standard cider. The reason I like this standard cider for floating is because, first of all, it's thicker, so it floats better. It holds more paste. Although I will say, when you're floating the cider, it's acting more as a placeholder than an actual suspension device. If I want a suspension device, I'm going to use the yarn or a bobber or a dry dropper. Let's get to the tightline dry dropper. So let me clip off this 6X piece and store it on my foam spools. Now for me, the yellow one is always the 6X, and that red one is always my standard or 4X, 5X. That's what I'm getting back out. So tying back into my tippet ring at the end of my standard cider. If you remember, I do have the 1X to 2X bicolor extension. And when I'm fishing tightline dry dropper, I don't mind if that's in there. Sometimes I want it in there, sometimes I don't really care if it is. So fishing tightline dry dropper really, well, then takes the tightline advantage over to a dry fly. And I love it. So I like to put the dry fly on a tag. And then down below that, at whatever distance, let's say 2 to 3 feet, really 1 to 4 feet, is where I'm going to put my nymph. I'm not trying to get all the way to the bottom necessarily and ride that strike zone when I'm fishing tightline dry dropper. I will fish it when I really think I have a good chance of those fish coming all the way up to the top and eating the dry fly and eating the nymph, maybe mid-column, mid-lower. It's just as simple really as clipping off your upper nymph and putting a dry fly there. I will say what I usually do though, if I know I'm going to do it for a while, to make turnover easier and more crisp and then accuracy better, down below my sighter, I have the dry fly only about 2 feet, sometimes even as close as 1 foot away from the sighter. I don't think it spooks them very much. One thing I want to mention is pure dry flies, no dropper, on a standard mono rig. I do it once in a while. If I'm nymphing along and I see just a couple rises up there, maybe one-timers where they come up once but they're not really actively feeding, and I just want to approach them from a little bit further back, then I would be able to get tightline dry dropper. Then I'll just take my standard Tippet setup, which is already on there, you know, 4X to 5X, even if it was the 6X. I just take the nymphs off, put the dry fly on the end, and see if it'll turn over. I often say you need more of a streamlined fly. Like a caddis with the downwing will cut through the air better than a parachute. You'll find your balance, right? But if you have good casting skills, you're going to use that standard mono rig to push that dry fly to the target. It's a good thing to have in your back pocket. So I'm fishing tightline dry dropper, having fun, but I want to go to streamers. I don't want to just clip off this nymph and throw a streamer on, because that's on 5X. I don't like to throw streamers on 5X. If I'm stripping streamers and the fly's coming this way and the fish eats, and he eats hard and fast and he goes the other way, bad things happen. So it's much easier, I think much better, to just clip off here at the tippet ring. Once again, save this for later. It's gonna save you time anyway, in the long run, really in the short run. It's gonna save me time by keeping those knots intact, keeping my whole dry dropper rig, in this case, set up. And it's on this spool. Notice that it's on the red spool because again, all I have to do is pop off that dry fly and put a tag nymph on there, and I am back to sort of my baseline tightline nymphing rig. End of the standard sighter, and here comes really 2 streamers ready to go on 1X. You can fish whatever diameter you want to your streamers, of course, but I like having all of this power because I'm not trying to get deep. I don't care about drag in the water when I'm fishing streamers, not much anyway. So 2 streamers ready to go on substantial tippet, because too I like to punch these streamers, you know, into the corners, and I'm gonna hit some branches. I'm gonna get tangled up, and I can pull on some pretty significant branches with 1X. And I have about 2 feet to my first streamer. We call it a tracer streamer, a little white one. Yeah, that doesn't have to be there, but I love having it there. Keeps the visibility in there if I can't see, in this case, the half pint. 2 streamers ready to go. It's just a couple seconds is all it takes to make the adjustment. So sometimes I do want to fish a thin or a micro thin. So what I used to do was just peel off my whole standard mono rig, roll it up on one of these spools, and tie on the micro or the thin, you know, straight to my fly line. But what I've been doing lately is taking the thin, for example, and putting it right here at this tippet ring. So I just clipped off our streamer tippet section. Rolling that up. For me, it's green streamer. See that? It rhymes. And this little spool always has 2 streamers ready to go, usually. And now I take the thin or the micro thin and tie it right on to the tippet ring. I always make these changes on the water, I should say. Just pulling this off, dumping it on the water. Things don't get so tangled like it's gonna happen here. Let me pull this off. Boy, that's gonna be a tangled mess. For me, my micro thin mono rig is a 5-pound butt section. And again, I've taken that and put it right at the end of my standard sighter, right where we're making all the changes. And now I have basically a double mono rig, the Troutbitten Standard and then the Troutbitten Micro right there. And then I can get all the performance that I want out of the Micro or go to the thin. Easy way to do it. I think it's easier. There's a little bit less changing to do. So we rolled through a lot of stuff there. And I know what we make about 8 or 9 or 10 adjustments. And you're not gonna make all 10 adjustments in one day, but just knowing those options are there for you. Knowing that you can do all of those things that we just went through, like all the possibilities in that Troutbitten Standard mono rig, there for you to just meet the trout on their own terms. It's, to me, being versatile is just a lot of fun. Knowing that you can do so many more things at any moment, anytime you want. All right, good times. Fish hard, friends. Have fun out there. You gotta lift with the knees, Josh. Lift at the knees.
I lift my back.
Huh?
I lift with my back.
Yeah, that's the best. Go box. Ready to go. Let's go fishing.
Agreed.